Prince George, situated almost in the geographic heart of British Columbia, stands on the southern threshold of the fabulous, resource-rich northlands of the province. Here is the hub of the northern economy, the gateway into the challenging wonderland of an awakening giant. Lying astride the confluence of the Nechako River and the Fraser, poised for its plunge to the rolling Pacific 500 miles away. Served by two modern railways, an expanding highway system, and a major airline. A vigorous and growing town of over 10,000 inhabitants, Prince George links the colorful and dramatic past of British Columbia's north with a future whose potential, though as yet not fully catalogued, gives promise of a staggering dimension. And yet she stands but typical of many other growing, hopeful, ambitious towns of the interior of British Columbia, and all with a common dependency. To a greater degree than upon any other factor, these towns and cities and the areas they center look for their economic lifeblood to the silent, seemingly endless, ever-changing forests and the industry they support. The forests radiating out as far as the eye can see, a massive empire of wood, the raw material out of which the provincial destiny is fashioned. The watchful, lowering trees, impressive symbols of Canada's greatest forest province. Upon no other single resource are British Columbians more dependent. For income, 40 to 60 cents of every dollar they earn originates in the forests. For recreation, with parks and lakes and streams abounding, all under the sheltering arms of the forests. For security, in the knowledge that the world will always need wood in some form. Throughout British Columbia, from her islands in the Pacific to the jagged wall of the Rocky Mountains, from the international boundary in the south to the 60th parallel north latitude, as the forests go, so goes the welfare of British Columbia citizens today and tomorrow. Fundamental to the continuity of any large-scale resource-using industry is the continuity of the resource upon which it is based. In few fields is this more vital than in the harvesting of the forests that support an industry worth hundreds of millions of dollars each year to British Columbians. This income can only be secure for all time through the introduction of sustained yield forestry practices. No other policy will maintain the benefits of creative, competitive industry in concert with a virile, growing, and balanced forest resource. There are alternatives to sustained yield. Alternatives like this, or this, or this. Harry Turner, born and educated in the interior. He and his friends know and love this country well. The outdoors to them is a natural world of hunting, fishing, swimming, a world in which they feel perfectly at ease. At high school, Harry took a course in forestry. He liked it. He did well. And this morning, he reports to the district office of the BC Forest Service to be interviewed as a possible member of the stand treatment crew.
First of all, I was introduced to the stand treatment supervisor. As he told me about the job, I could feel his enthusiasm. He told me that British Columbia was trying to harvest its forests on a sustained yield basis. Sustained yield is a system of forest management where the total volume of wood cut and lost through disease, fire, and insects just equals the net volume of new sound wood growing during the same period of time. He pointed out that there are many ways of getting a sustained yield, and one way used in this area was tree marking. Marking the trees to be cut by the operator so as to leave the stand in the best possible condition to continue growing fast and well. This is particularly important in the northern spruce balsam forests because the stand quality following uncontrolled cutting is often not as good as it was before cutting. By selecting trees to be cut through careful marking, The quality of these and some other types of stands is being steadily improved. This was what I would be trained to do. I met George, the assistant stand treatment supervisor, and soon got the idea that this type of work was mighty important, not only to the area around here, but over the whole province as well. Later that morning, George and I set out on a sort of guided tour lasting several days. We covered a lot of ground. We tramped out on to old operations where George drew my attention to such things as litter and slash on the ground. We noticed the lack of young seedlings, the broken and smashed young trees, the waste in usable wood still lying around. We watched a marked timber sale actually under operation, with everyone working smoothly, each knowing his job well. Ballers, the buckers, the cat skinners. It was here I first saw the splashes of blue paint as the logs were being hauled out. These were the trees the crews had marked after discussion with the forest ranger, and it was for these trees that the operator had bid at a timber sale auction in the ranger's office. We looked over the sawmills, the big ones for this part of the country, cutting over 50,000 board feet a day. And the small portable mills, of which there are many hundreds around here. I watched the fallers working close down on the base of the tree to avoid any waste. The cats and arches yarding the stuff out on carefully planned skid trails so as not to damage standing young growth and seedlings. These loggers, I could see, were real craftsmen and took pride in their work. George told me that the stand treatment system didn't just happen. It is based on many years of study in all the main spruce growing areas of the world. One doesn't pretend to have all the answers. It is, however, the best answer anyone has figured out up to the present time. It is a practical system of cutting to keep the forest producing, to increase their production, and to look after the wood requirements of the industry forever. Here in BC, the systems of treatment being used are based on both silvicultural and time studies, which have been carried on by the Forest Service since 1952. The knowledge gained from these studies has made it possible to operate the program so that it can be a sound economic proposition for any well-run logging outfit. Using a series of stopwatches and special charts for recording time periods and functions, Forest Service specialists can now estimate costs for felling, bucking, skidding, for road building, and for many other factors to a very exact degree. When appraising the timber and setting the price, below which the Forest Service will not sell, all these costs are considered and allowed for by the district forester and his staff. After 3 days of our guided tour, George took me to meet the crew I'd be trying out with. When we got to the trailer where they lived, we found the crew hadn't returned from work, so we looked over the layout. It was clean, efficient, and simple, but it looked comfortable, and I began to relax a bit. We heard the outboard on the river and went down to meet the crew. Don, the foreman, and Hank and Charlie. They looked and talked like good guys. As I tried to get to sleep that first night, I realized George had been looking me over for the last 3 days to see if I would fit in. Living and working together 24 hours a day means each man on the crew has to fit in with the others. Teamwork and mutual respect are a must on a stand treatment crew. Out with the crew for the first few days, I found there was even more to learn than I had imagined. The boys didn't seem to worry. They told me they didn't expect me to know anything anyway, and encouraged me to ask all the questions I could think of, which I did. Eventually, Don, the foreman, decided I was ready to try working with the crew. I felt a bit nervous, but picked up the gear, took a deep breath, and started out. Dawn watched me closely and fussed around like a mother hen. I wanted to keep going, but he kept calling me back and repeating over and over again that this was a job for great care. Think carefully, he said. Think of the forestry angle. What are you trying to accomplish forestry-wise? Think of the logger's angle. Can he take this one out without damaging the young growth? Can he cut the marked trees and make a profit? I had to think of all these things all the time, because once the marking is done, it cannot be undone. First, I had to remember to leave 40% of the stand unless otherwise instructed. Never mark just one stem of a forked tree. The part of the tree left will be a poor shape and no use to anyone. Always place the butt marks as low as possible on the tree so that a check can be made after logging to see that only the marked trees were cut. I kept looking at my little do's and don'ts book because I didn't want to make any mistakes. Always round off the corners of blocks of seed trees or alternate strips so as to reduce blowdown from high winds as much as possible. On the way back to camp one day, Don stopped the truck to show me a different type of marking to the single tree system we had been working with. Even though I was a greenhorn, I could see that this stand was not the same as the ones we had been in before. Don told me this was an example of alternate strip cutting, and he explained why this particular system was used. Why the strips had been left as a seed source for natural regeneration, how the ground had been prepared to encourage regeneration. We looked for seedlings and found evidence that showed the area would return to a fast-growing young stand as a result of careful marking techniques. As we walked back to the truck, I was struck with the importance of the work and its responsibility. I could see how poor marking could put an operator out of business by ruining him financially. Poor marking could wreck a stand of trees for 100 years, but good marking could be of great benefit both to today's loggers and to the loggers and the general public in the future. And just when I thought I knew something about the job, just when I began to get a little confident, I found myself back in school. Not Prince George High School, it's true, but a school just the same. Here, our teachers were the best tree markers in the business. Forest officers with years of experience under all sorts of conditions. The district silviculturist, the head of silviculture for the whole province. We listened hard. We asked questions. We took notes. And we wrote exams. Here I was back at school, but this school was different. Here we learned about our jobs and how to do our jobs better. We learned the real reason for marking, to keep the forests healthy, of high commercial value, fast-growing, and capable of regenerating themselves for the future. We learned about the organization of the Forest Service and where we worked in as part of the district staff and at the same time a part of the overall Forest Management Division. We learned to identify the different trees, various silvicultural systems designed to produce the best possible growth from each species. For example, the clear cutting and selection systems in spruce. Spruce occurs in many different forms. In stands where the trees are all about the same age, these are called even-aged, and where they are of different ages called uneven-aged. Spruce can reproduce in its own shade. It doesn't need much sunlight. The even-age stands are often composed of large trees. In these stands, the object is to mark to encourage natural regeneration. This is done by marking for a form of clear cutting such as I had already seen with Dawn. In uneven-age stands, where there is a mixture of large old trees and small young trees, the object is to encourage the growth of the young trees. Here, single larger trees are marked for cutting. This gives the smaller trees more room to grow and allows seedlings to take root and grow in the shade as a new forest. We got to know the instruments we would be using on the job. The abney for measuring tree heights, the chain for checking boundaries. I found it was a tricky business to handle a chain neatly. And of course, we learned how to use a compass. We were then taken through the woods to identify tree diseases, of which there are many. As our teachers had already told us, stand treatment is not always the answer for regeneration. Sometimes an area has gone too far, and then it has to be planted with stock grown in Forest Service nurseries. We tried our hand at this too and found there are tricks to be learned in doing anything well. And we learned to take tree measurements efficiently and to use the increment borer to find out tree ages. The whole program is based on just such precise measurement and never on site-of-eye appraisal. And we learned to recognize the different marks and what they meant. The mark for selective cutting, a seed tree to be left, the mark for strip cutting, We were also trained in safety and care and maintenance of mechanical equipment, the outboard motors, the jeeps, and so on. We learned of the economics of logging, the seasonal problems, the marketing problems, the production problems. We found out that our particular forest district cut some 646 million board feet a year, and that this was milled by over 700 sawmills, shipping 1,200 carloads of lumber per month. When the formal schooling was finished, I went back to my crew. Hank and Charlie kidded me about being the big brain now. It was great to be back, ready and trained for the big job ahead. That was a couple of years ago. Since then, I have managed to pass the assistant ranger's exams, the ranger's exams, and get in a whole lot of field experience. I'm a foreman now with a crew of my own, and I still get as much satisfaction from my work as I ever did. Only this morning I was explaining the big picture to the new greenhorn just arrived with my crew. I tried to tell him all the things I remembered old George and Don telling me, and I told him about the school and the fact that there are now almost 120 of us tree markers working all over the province. I told him British Columbia is trying its best to put her forests on a sustained yield basis, and that this means we have to farm rather than mine our forests so they will continue to produce. I told him that as a result of stand treatment and other forest management methods, the face of British Columbia's forests is changing. Changing from when cut-over areas were jungles of slash and debris, broken and damaged young growth, smashed and ruined regeneration, areas with a hopeless future. Slowly, this scarred, ruined face of the forest is changing to neat, clean areas where cutting has been done under controlled systems. Areas where seed trees are left undamaged and protected, singly or in seed blocks. Areas where the cutting has been in strips to ensure regeneration. Selection cut areas where the young trees get a chance to grow fast and strong. I told him that in this way our forests have a fighting chance to survive, healthy and vigorous, to serve the industry and all British Columbians forever. And in this, the stand treatment program plays a vital part. To some people, splashing blue paint on trees may look kind of silly. To those who know and understand the forests as they are today and could be tomorrow, and the problems and needs of the industry today and tomorrow, this splash of blue is the mark of progress.